What instantly puts a candidate in the no bucket, even if their CV is like super strong?
Well, I've got some tips in here that we can talk about what not to do. Yeah, so for anyone want to write them down.
If you are an immigrant in corporate and you've ever felt like you had to work twice as hard just to be taken seriously, today's conversation is for you. So our guest today, Elena, has worked across some of Australia's most respected organizations, including Telstra, ANZ, Myers, and People First Bank, of course. But long before the titles, Elena was an immigrant as well, navigating a new system, going through a new culture, and really what I would call a new level of self-doubt.
English is not my first language, so the first barrier that I confronted as an immigrant was the language, the culture, the feeling like I can immerse myself into the culture. That's really the big psychological hurdle.
Elena, if I were to ask you right now, what would you say strong candidates do subconsciously that weak candidates do not do?
Very good. Well, now I'm going to give you a few quick points again.
Today isn't about titles. It's really about what hiring managers actually look for, how, as an immigrant, you can survive the corporate politics, and really what really moves the needle when it comes to interview. So, Elena, thank you so much for joining us today. My first question to you would be, before everything you're known for right now, what's the part of your journey that has shaped you the most?
Yeah, thank you for having me, Teo. I'm very excited to talk about this. This is very dear to my heart. Firstly, I'm also an immigrant myself from a family of Chinese speakers. So that English is not my first language. So the first barrier that I confronted as an immigrant was, the language, the culture, the language, feeling like I can immerse myself into the culture, feeling like I belong. That's really the big psychological hurdle. But for me, I was fortunate enough to start life as an immigrant fairly early on in my school life. So I had time to pick that up before I started looking for my first job. So that was a blessing in disguise. That gave me a lot of training ground to find my way and find my confidence. But I do actually remember how it felt in my first few jobs trying to find my way around. So so my background with my family going through, and I've seen how life was difficult for them to find their job as well. They're also professionals looking for jobs in their 40s in a different country, speaking a different language. And so, I can completely relate. Yeah.
It is hard. And thank you for going down that memory lane. But one thing I wanted to delve into, Elena, is could you take me back to when you first left Hong Kong? Like, what were you most afraid of? Like, how old were you at the time?
I was young. It was just stepping into my high school age. And I think the first thing that really was daunting for me was the language barrier. I didn't feel like I was able to speak fluently, and I was told that I was very quiet. That's not because I'm not a talkative person. It's just because I wasn't confident to speak. I had a lot of thoughts, but I wasn't confident to speak up. So the confidence and the language barrier was really the first thing that I felt was the biggest hurdle for me. And then I get used to it after a while being at school and getting comfortable with the language and learning the culture. And slowly I came out of my shell, be more confident. But my journey then beyond that as a leader had to take me to a very different level. And that was a very big journey into my professional career.
Wow. So you mentioned that you weren't confident in your English. A little bit contrast to me. It wasn't just my English that I wasn't confident in. I just wasn't confident in everything because it was new. And I moved to Australia when I was really young as well. And I know a lot of people are going through that sort of situation. But saying you weren't confident in your English, like, could you describe to me in words, how did that actually show up day to day for you? Like, what did your day look like going through those phases of not feeling very confident in your English?
It was just not wanting to speak up, in a school setting where you're meant to be finding new friends, being in a new environment. The hardest thing for somebody, at a school age is not having the network around you, not having the support. And so as any immigrant coming in, you have to start life all over again, completely new network, new friends, new circle. And finding my confidence in not able to speak up and communicate was really a big hurdle for me to find new friends and establish my own network. Feeling really sad that I had to leave my friends behind because I already had lots of friends, and coming in and being in Australia, that was really big. That was really challenging for me to find new friends, adapting to the culture. And I remember it was one time we were talking to a few people and they were all talking about footy, and I remember clearly I didn't know what that was, and I felt like I wasn't like an outcast. Because I didn't understand the sport, I didn't know enough about it to be in the conversation, and so straight away you feel like, oh, I don't belong because I didn't understand the culture. I didn't know enough about it to have a good conversation. So I don't know whether people feel that way, but I certainly felt that way when I first started. Yeah.
And that can be very alienating as well when you don't feel like you belong somewhere. Could you recall a moment where everything kind of turned around for you? Even when you were in high school, what was that moment where you started to get your own voice and feel confident to speak a bit more?
I think it wasn't just one moment. It was many little moments. I don't think things just turned around straight away, but as I learned more English, I'm able to communicate better. I felt more confident. I'm naturally a very talkative person, so it wasn't a problem for me to speak. It was just confidence for me to be able to voice my opinion and talk about and be able to socialize with people. I think a few key moments in my life would be as I established my network of friends, I felt like more myself again. And I felt that confidence does help me find myself, who I am, and my new way of life. I then find myself in my career path as a BA and then working as a leader. The turning moments were finding out why is it that I wasn't able to get to where I was, where I want to get to, finding out my own identity and how can I be true to myself but still be able to show up as a leader. How do I be supporting people around me? My turning moment was when I met my mentor in Maya. She was the GM of delivery, and through her eyes I was able to see how you can be confident as a female but also not having the culture and language and still feel that you can be adapted and feeling like you belong. And I think through that moment and being given a lot of opportunities to grow, that was really a turning point for me to feel confident in what I do, and I am actually good at what I do and I feel like I didn't have to be ashamed of that. Yeah.
Thinking in those moments, because I'm thinking about this now as a parent myself, and for you it did look like it was just the English part of things, but thinking about children who look slightly differently from every single person in their school and just not feeling like maybe they belong in that community. What advice do you have for parents of kids like that? Are there any practical things that parents can do to continue to empower their children so they see past the color or the accent or the language, as the case may be? What would you say?
This is very close to my heart. I am also a mum. I've got 2 young kids. I do tell them that you got to see past what's in front of you, which is the persona, the skin, the eyes, the hair, and just really be with people that really value you and respect you and think about values rather than the appearance. And I influence my kids in that way. So they're not thinking about being different, because subconsciously find yourself in these places, but we need to think about this differently, because the way we perceive ourselves can also be a way how other people would perceive us. So the first thing is, hey, how do I take that barrier away from myself and help myself be integrated with the community around me? So I think that's one thing. And I think we've also come a long way in terms of the culture. We're a lot more inclusive. We're more adaptive to different cultures. And those barriers, I think it's come down a lot. When I was little, I think that was very different in a very different environment. Certainly my parents have been through different types of treatment because of the way they look. And so I've seen what that looks like when I was younger. I do find that work culture is now shifting, a lot more inclusive as well. So yeah, that's really good to see.
So Elena, right now, moving into your career, having worked with Telstra, ANZ, Maya, and currently working with People First Bank, was there any moment in your career where you thought, maybe I don't belong here? Do you have a moment like that?
Many times. I think the imposter syndrome is in us in various different ways. Sometimes you feel like, oh, do I know what I'm doing? And sometimes you doubt yourself. And I think that doesn't matter which country you're from or what background you're in, there's always a moment of doubt in your mind, and that's healthy. Actually, it's not an unhealthy thing to do. Sometimes you got to question, but there's also a different side that I feel like actually you've got to think beyond those that have overseas experience looking for a job. You might think, oh, actually that's not relevant because it's not Australian-based experience, but actually no, they are very important. You just need to help people see what is the same experience being applied differently. And so for me, the imposter syndrome lives in all of us, I believe. You got to think beyond that to think, well, actually, what is it that I'm offering and what value add I can provide? And as soon as you think about the good that you're doing, that erodes the negativity on the flip side of that. And I find myself having really healthy, encouraging thoughts in my head helps me beyond that. and looking at ways that I can take feedback and look at things that I can improve. One of the things that I work on for a very, very long time since I've migrated to this country is my communication skills. So whilst I can speak fluent English, the ability to communicate is very, very important. It stands you apart from looking for a job to presenting to providing vision to a team. So ongoingly, I practice communication and I look to perfect it in every shape or form I can think of. So that's a confidence building aspect that I use to help balance out the self-doubt.
I've got a lot of questions just following up from everything that you've just mentioned, because you've touched on really cool things. Talking about having the healthy, encouraging thoughts. I think that's a really powerful thing that you touched on there, Elena. And also learning the ability to communicate. Can you tell me, like, from your perspective, what would anyone be missing out on if they lacked the ability to communicate?
It's a huge thing for me. It happened actually quite recently. It was only a couple of years ago. I've always had the understanding that I can speak fluent and that's okay and that's all I needed. But when I looked at my husband is English, and so he's spoken English all his life. And so I find that he was able to communicate very effectively and finding himself different opportunities. And I've always asked myself, hey, why is it that it's not so easy for me to get there? Why is it that I find it so hard for me to get the opportunity that he has? And so the one moment that it sort of dawned on me was actually he was able to network and bond with people and having the engagement, being able to establish relationship and finding the bond, even work setting or outside work setting, was super critical. It takes away just having this transactional conversation to become more of a relationship bonding moment professionally or privately. And he's very good at that. So one thing I've learned from him is be able to socialize and find rapport. The other one is being able to communicate. It's not just being able to regurgitate words, but rather be clear about the point you want to make and be able to express that effectively. And so it's not about the output, but it's the input. So input is how do you find a way for that person receiving that information to receive that piece of information in the way you want them. And I find him really effective at doing those two things. And so that's why I realized at that moment, it's not just about being able to speak, but how do you use the tool of speaking to help you? And a professional standpoint, and the topic we're talking about today is about getting a job. Actually, being able to build the rapport in the interview, that's super important because that person in front of you doesn't know anything about you. So building a rapport, as well as being able to communicate effectively, use less words, but get to the point, as well as the people listening is able to also get your point coming across. Those were the two key things that I've learned. And so I quickly went and started doing a communications course myself and start practicing more. So I'm still on a learning journey myself.
Of course, I mean, like, we all have to continue to learn, evolve in ourselves. So during this period, Elena, are there any daily habits that we can bake into like our everyday routine that can unconsciously improve our communication skills?
I think in general setting, it's hard. But if we talk about looking for a job, I think doing that practice, even finding a friend to practice how you do your questions and answers, having the answers already prepared ahead of time will help you feel confident at that moment because mentally you've done the work. You'll be surprised to know how many people doesn't prepare for interviews. I can spot them because I'm a hiring manager and I do a lot of that day to day. I can definitely tell who's prepared mentally. It's amazing the differences straight away.
That's interesting, Elena. Like, how do you spot that someone hasn't prepared when you see them in an interview? Like, what are some of the things that they will do that make you go right off the bat? This person never prepared for this session.
They don't get to the point. They're not clear about what is it that they talk about. They go off on a tangent. Straight away, we know that you haven't prepared. When you've mentally prepared for something and you've put notes aside, you've written things for yourself, you've practiced, you come out speaking more confidently and more polished. And straight away, people know that you've put in the work and you've done some research ahead of time. Some people even research the workplace ahead of time. So when they come in with the answers, it's not just an answer, but it's a tailor-made answer.
Tailor-made answer. So you can generally tell they've done their homework. They've gone ahead and learned about this company, what they need, and they haven't just come and gave generic answer. And this is what I say to people in my world. When you think about the concept of parenting, you could have 3 children from you, but what are the chances that they love and enjoy the same thing?
Yeah. Yeah.
So you're not going to treat child A the same way you treat child B. And I say to people, why then do you treat your interview like that? Why do you treat you getting hired like that? Every job has got a need, and you have to be able to tailor your responses to their needs. So it's actually really interesting that you mentioned that. But I wanted to ask you, what instantly puts a candidate in the no bucket, even if their CV is like super strong?
Well, I've got some tips in here that we can talk about what not to do. It's my key points here. So for anyone want to write them down, what not to do is all about how you carry yourself. Some of the things that straight off the bat is a no is, like I said, you waffle on. So the moment I asked you, hey, tell me something about yourself, people go off a tangent and they wouldn't really think about what is the point behind the question, and they would decide to talk about their life story, but most of it hasn't got any relevance to the role. And you go, okay, well, where is it? What is the point that you're trying to make and trying to convey? And the audience lose interest very, very quickly if you can't get to the point and you can't be very clear around what is it that you do and you're good at. A very open question is a good way for me to understand, do you understand the brief of the role, and are you able to articulate very clearly what you're really good at? We can get to it really quickly. You can establish why you're here and get to the point. That's how you get the engagement. So I think one thing is for everyone to remember that, and the analogy I would say is you kind of want to treat an interview like speed dating. In a way, because you want to make a good impression really, really quickly. So you don't want to spend time talking about your life story, but you kind of also need to read the room, when to say more, when to not say too much. Look at what the interviewer's face are telling you. They're also a really good way to think about it.
That begs the question, Elena. When an interviewer says, tell me about yourself, if you were to summarize it under like 4 or 5 bullet points, what are they actually listening for in that question?
Yeah, absolutely. First thing that they want to gauge is more about you. What is uniquely about you? I've read your CV. I don't need you to regurgitate what's in your CV. That's really important, because a lot of people come in and they feel like they just need to tell me what's already written in their CV. We've selected that person because we've already understood your background. So by saying, tell me something about yourself, it's really a way for me to establish a few things. One is your experience. Really, really quickly, tell me why is it that your experience matches the role. So come in with an idea of what are the key elements of your experience that closely match with the role that we provide you. Get there really quickly. Secondly, is to give me an idea of how you are as a person. So showing your personality, showing about you. So it's okay to share about you, your story, because I want to understand your personality, because part of the interview is not just about technical capability. It's also about behavioral. It's about culture fit. It's about how you as a person showing up at work. There's also opportunity for you to show up, showing resilience, being a problem solver, etc. Those are the behavioral aspect of a role that we look for. So through answers, we're trying to gauge who you are as a person. So I would say when we give you really high level, sort of broad questions, it's really there for you to come in with very clear idea of what is it that we want you. Join us straight away tomorrow. Why is it that you are so important? And show us a bit of your journey, your personality.
Wow. Now, thanks for highlighting that. And just back to the all soft skills and technical skills. So from your perspective, over the years, how would you say the preference for strong soft skills has evolved over the preference for perhaps strong technical skills?
I hire a lot of business analysts, so I'll talk about it from the perspective of that. I would confidently say every CV I receive about a BA looks exactly the same. Most of them looks exactly the same, because the work you do is very similar from one job to another. So I can't tell who you are purely from the work that you've done, but I know for a fact that great BAs have excellent soft skills, excellent behavior skills, and that stands you apart. So if I don't see that, then I'm not going to be convinced that you'll be right for the job. Now, from a behavioral point of view, I would say communicate, not talk. So that's one thing. Talk with a point in mind. So when I say communicate, means speak with a point in mind. Can do, not learn. So people do come in and say, oh, I'm willing to learn. Well, actually, you're not here to learn, you're here to do, but you can be can do. You can have the mindset to want to learn and want to be better, because we all need that, myself included. So the can do attitude is good. Don't tell me to come in that you want to learn. The job is not for you to be here to learn. I mean, brutally, this is what it is, but we will always be coaching and supporting and growing people in the job. But when you're selecting a candidate, you want to select a candidate that can just come in and do.
I appreciate the honesty with that. A couple of days ago, I did put a video out and I said, stop going to interviews to tell recruiters, I'm here to learn. They are not a university. If you want to learn, go to university. This is not a university. Hiring managers are looking for people that can hit the ground running.
Yeah, well, yes, it's brutal, but it is the truth. I mean, when you have a selection of, 30 people, you would want to have people that actually know how to do their job already. And that's just how the selection process goes. But it doesn't mean that you can't demonstrate your keenness to learn and develop. So you can say, hey, I've done these courses to help build my skills up and I'm looking to continue on with that. And that I'm very confident that I can do the job and I will continue to learn. That's fine because you're saying that, you can do the job, but you're also keen to learn. And that's really great because that shows your mindset of wanting to grow. And that's really important from a behavioral point of view. The other one is being a problem solver. So you ask when you're confronted with a challenging situation or how do you manage stakeholders? They're all about problem solving. So it doesn't matter about what you say, but it's about the attitude in which you take to manage that situation. So we look for not so much the clarity of the answer, but your attitude in working out ways to solve and how creative you are in finding ways to solve. And that builds then the next thing about that is about the resilience. How resilient are you? Do you always just ask your line manager for help? Do you look for ways to solve it yourself first? And you think about how you can add value and looking for opportunities or looking at resources around you, people around you to help you solve the problem, and how resilient are you in trying to drive the right outcome. That's really the key to those type of questions. And so ultimately it's about the growth mindset is, do I see things negatively or do I see things positively? And I'm looking for ways to get to a positive outcome, whichever way I get there.
So when a hiring manager says, Tayo, can you tell me what some of your weaknesses are? What are you guys actually wanting candidates to say in those moments?
Yeah, that's a great question because we all want to know whether you recognize yourself. Self-awareness is key. Everyone has a weakness. And to say that you don't have one, tells me either you're not being truthful or you don't have growth mindset, that you're not keen to always learn more and grow as a person. And so understanding your weakness is a way for me to understand, are you aware of your weaknesses? So like I said, I'm always looking to perfect my communication and I always continue to learn. So whilst that is a weakness that I recognize, you're also telling people that, hey, I'm also working on it and I'm always going to continue on working on it. So it's important for you to give a very honest answer about areas that you think you like to improve, but also it's important to reflect that this is something I recognize, but I'm also actively looking to improve it.
I think a lot of people approach that question from a place of fear. So as an example, if you were applying for the position of a business analyst, we all know for you to be an excellent BA, you need to have great communication skills. I think as it would apply to any role, essentially. So I'm thinking psychologically, a candidate might not feel very inclined to be open about that because especially they've thought to themselves, this is a critical skill required for this position. I then go to the interview. I said to them, oh, actually, I'm trying to work on this communication skill of mine. The mindset is that they might not get the job. So my question to you is, how can they navigate that? Because I think the problem isn't that people don't want to be honest. It's more like they're going to get judged based on that honesty. And on top of that, you're a person of color like myself. You already have an accent. You go into an interview and you say to them, one of your weaknesses is communication. Mentally, I feel like that might not make them give me the job. Like, is that a fair assumption to make? And how can we navigate that?
Personally, I don't think of that. It's a very good point. I guess from my point of view, I don't see it in that way, but I'm really happy that you brought that up. Communication, I would say that even people that are not color or come from an English-speaking background does not necessarily mean that they're very good communicators. So let's establish that. So I think communication is a universal problem. It could be that different upbringing and background may make it difficult because you're coming in and you're judging based on your experience and your ability to communicate in English as opposed to a language that you know very, very well. So I get your point. Will I be judged if I say I need to work on my communication? Well, the fact that you're already in the interview and that you're able to demonstrate your skills would mean that it's something that you can recognize, but you can say that this is something that you're actively working on and that you're taking steps to be more fluent. Certainly, I don't take that into account I just want people to feel that don't let that stop you from the confidence in which you would want to bring yourself into an interview. Your accent doesn't defy you. How you communicate doesn't defy you. Your attitude, your confidence, and all of the skills that you have all belongs to you. And it's about showing up and showing how that skill is important to a workplace, and don't feel that that is a barrier for you. It's really important. I think that the negative thought needs to be countered. And whilst the communication is key, don't feel that this is the barrier for you. Yeah.
I mean, like, based on what you're saying, Alina, I would almost think also framing of things are very critical as well.
Yes.
So based on what you've mentioned, like in the way that you also express to them what your weaknesses are, you don't want to position it as, yeah, it's a weakness, I don't know how to fix it. You have to position it as, I recognize this, which is what hiring managers are looking for, that's self-aware. And also this is something that you're working towards. I'd almost assume like that, more like what you're alluding to.
Exactly. So it is absolutely okay. Like, I think the culture is important, an element that immigrants may not really understand. In an Australian culture, we are informal, and we are also very much appreciative of people speaking up and having their own ideas and talking about what is unique and special about themselves. And don't feel that you need to conform. Sometimes you can just be yourself and talk about it. Recognizing where your weaknesses are, it's not a sign of weakness, but it's also about understanding yourself. The self-awareness of oneself is important. And I want people to feel that you can own that, and just know that you need to tell people that you're already working on it, and that you're practicing, and that you'll only get better. But coming from a different country, speaking a different language all your life, and then in English-speaking country, we don't expect you to be completely fluent from day one, and that's okay. And we all have to be really kind to ourselves to not feel that, that is a barrier psychologically for you. I want everyone to give that a really good go and practice and be immersed in a culture.
I should say that's one of the things that I really appreciate about the Australian culture. In comparison to where I've come from, you almost need to appear perfect. So the expectation is that you have no flaws. And a lot of people come into the country with that sort of mindset, and they have this wall in between some of their weaknesses and some of their strength. And it's almost as though you're not allowed to have weaknesses, right? I've noticed that the Australian culture actually favors and embraces people to be a bit more open about their struggles. Like my experience, the people that I've worked with, like, people are very open in saying, oh, I'm actually learning this particular thing, or I am not very skilled at this area yet. Or someone might be saying, oh, I might lean on you to support me with this. And it's just like very more accommodating. Whereas where I've come from, like, you're the boss and you kind of need to know everything, and you're on the job, you need to know everything. Whereas here, it is slightly different. Has that kind of been like your experience as well? Or is that your read on what the Australian culture is as well?
Yeah, actually, I have had a think about what the Australian culture looks like in a professional standpoint. I've got a few things that I want to talk through. One is that the Australian culture is quite flat in hierarchy. What does that mean? It means that we're actually, rather than just the title, we really love and appreciate people speaking up, sharing their ideas, having questions. Even if the interviewer's asking you a question that you didn't understand, it is absolutely okay to say, hey, didn't really understand that aspect. Could you explain that? Or do you mean this? Or do you mean that? It's okay to clarify and make sure that you understand the question before you answer. And it's not a sign of disrespect. You are keen to understand and understand it well. And so for us in the Australian culture, I think we are quite happy for people to speak up and share their ideas, or have questions that you would kindly want to challenge, or if you want things to be clarified. The other thing is about communication style. We're quite direct and casual. Again, from an Asian background, I also appreciate the hierarchy. People that are more senior to you, you don't want to speak up in a certain way. You don't want to be too direct. Well, actually, I appreciate it as a leader. I appreciate people be very open and honest with me. We like to be casual. We don't need to be the hierarchy of being spoken to in a certain way because of your title. We like to be quite direct. It's okay to be direct in the sense that from a professional standpoint, if you feel that something can be done in a different way, it's about conveying the right message and to influence people to how they perceive it. And you can do it in a blunt way, or you can do it in a soft way. But ultimately, in a professional standpoint, it is appreciated that you can be somewhat direct about how you feel about certain things, but done in a professional manner. We also really appreciate sort of work-life balance. So people that has come in interviews would say, oh, I'm happy to work 10 hours a day or 80 hours a week. Well, actually, in the Australian culture, that's not necessarily needed. We really appreciate people wanting to do more, but it's not an expectation. So sometimes I felt that they have to be willing to work 80 hours a week. That's not the case at all, not in a healthy Australian culture. I cannot say that for every workplace, but certainly the workplaces I've worked for, that's absolutely the case. I've also talked about networking and socializing. That's really important beyond work. It's about rapport. It's about building relationships, professional relationships around you. And even in an interview, you can build that. You can build rapport and you can build trust. You can be funny. You can show your personality. Absolutely smile. Please, everyone that comes into an interview, please smile and show yourself. Just simple thing like smiling actually makes the setting of that interview, the tone of that just mellow, and you can just be a little bit more candid about your answers too. Show a little bit about you. Those are things that people don't think of. They come in and feeling like they need to just be their best self, and it just means that you come in with these really restricted versions of yourself. The speed dating doesn't work very well when you're not presenting yourself with your personality and a bit of candidness. Yeah.
Wow. I'm really just sitting here thinking, this is so practical in my mind. I can instantly see how culturally people, especially like if you're African like me, so I'm Nigerian, and when you go to interviews like in Nigeria, you need to kind of like very straight, bold, not bold, I mean very serious about it, because the culture would then perceive you as someone who is like very competent about the job. Whereas what I've noticed in the Australian culture is they just want you to still be yourself. No one is going to hire a resume. They're hiring a human being, and they want to be certain that when I see you in the coffee room, you and I can actually have a chat. So this is something that I constantly say to people in my world, career changes, like you have to go into an interview and smile. And it's so great to hear you reaffirm that those things are really, really critical if you want to stand out in an interview.
Yeah, be excited, show passion, because just even something so subconscious, it really stands you apart from everyone else, because everyone else is sitting there really serious and going through all of the notes in their heads. As soon as you're there to just show up, smile, be confident, show passion about your work, show excitement, you're already 10 times different to everyone else just by doing that. So be confident, show your personality, be a little bit more, just a bit more you. Yeah.
Elena, do you like small talks?
I would say it's not my second nature to have small talks, but I'm learning to do that, and I'm learning more and more to be able to do that, because I do find that is a very essential part of life. You meet friends from a professional standpoint, so I would say no, I'm not very good at that, but I'm getting better at it.
A lot of people have like sentiment about it, like they'd rather not make small talks, and I've been digging deeper into what it really means when you say like let's make small talk. Is it an essential thing to have, especially when it comes to networking and connections?
In Australia, it's absolutely essential. Yeah, absolutely. And it doesn't have to be hard work. How do I have small talks? What do I talk about? It doesn't have to be a difficult thing. You can literally just think about, actually, the communications course that I've taken has taught me this little tip. It's called high-low buffalo. All you have to think about is something that really excited you, so the high, something that wasn't so exciting for you, the low, and then something that's quirky that you can think of, really outfield buffalo. And if you just want to start a conversation with somebody that you've never met, pick one of those things and start talking about it, and just take your mind off that this is a small talk. Just go with, hey, the other day I was watching something on Netflix. It was so good. Oh, have you seen it? Like, it could be just anything, literally anything. The point is that you are giving a piece of information about yourself, and in exchange for something else that you want to learn about another person. And from that point, you can then link to another point, and then link to another point. And that then helps you build a picture of that person, and you're learning a bit more about that person. And small talk is just burst of information about each other.
No, I love that. I actually do love that you mentioned that. The other day, I was listening to this very important podcast, and the person spoke about there's just a mental barrier when people know they need to make small talks, and instantly they actually cannot communicate anymore. And I could really appreciate that perspective. But he did mention something as well, very similar to what you've mentioned. He said, with small talks, you can steer the conversation in the direction that you wanted. So as opposed to people think small talks is solely about talking about the weather and talking about your dogs and talking about your pets and things like that. But he said small talks is way more than that. Like, you can make small talks about just anything, but if you know that it's something that it's not particularly your strength, you can steer it in the way that you would feel more comfortable. Maybe it's your business, like you mentioned the ILO Buffalo, like something that you like, something that interests you, and you both can find a common ground, and small talks progresses into something actually a bit more productive for you both, something that you would enjoy and naturally just move through.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the purpose of that. Sometimes you just want to make a connection. So you just talk about things and you find things, breadcrumbs about the person that you want to make association to. And then next thing you know, you find that you've got something in common together, and that's how you create a connection with that person. I mean, if you talk about during the conversation, that would be more down the influence part, it says something that I want to talk about specifically to a point or getting to an outcome. That's something you want to absolutely really, really powerful thing, especially in business analysis. Something that we do very often is how do we communicate to get to an outcome? So getting to not just communicating, but getting to an outcome takes a lot of art and skills to find yourself in that way. But even if you just want to just make connections with people, that's super, super important in any setting, and more importantly in interviews. Yeah.
Alina, if I were to ask you right now, what would you say strong candidates do subconsciously that weak candidates do not do?
Very good. Well, now I'm going to give you a few quick points again. One is about outcome, not output. When you talk, again, we've seen your CV and resume. I don't need to know all of the detailed activities that you do in your job. To me, that's probably all the things I already know, but what's the outcome that you were trying to drive? So it's good to do a job, but have you thought about what outcome you're trying to achieve? So we talk about in the position of outcome rather than output, then that changes your value in that role. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So outcome rather than output, value add, not contribution. So value add means what are the results that you produce, what was different about how you've done certain things. And it's not just that you're contributing to the role. So I've done this, I've taken this instruction, I've made that, I have built a process. Where's the value? Oh, the process speed up the way we do this workflow by 5%. And I didn't make it just 5%, I made it 6% because I found this other way to do it even faster, or remove the manual process around this particular component. So it's adding that extra bit of where's the value add of myself. It's not just that I did this, but I've made it better. That's really important. So another one is myself, not my team. Right. So when you do an interview, I like to know about your team, but I'm more interested about you. So when you say, oh, my team did this, or we did this, or
you did,
yeah, I'm not hearing you. So take the ownership back and say, hey, I own this piece of work. I did this. I produced that. And I've successfully implemented this using the word I. And this is very subconscious when it's not something you've done personally. Subconsciously, the we comes out. You say it without even thinking about it. And we pick up on words like that and we go, actually, well, how many people are in your team and what was your role? Very quickly, I can understand, well, actually, were you instrumental in achieving that, or was it somebody else? So myself, not my team. Another one is don't go off on a tangent. So try and be as succinct as you can and don't offer too much detail at the get-go. You got to read the room and know when to stop, where to pause, and where to slow down if you're finding that people are less engaged. So those are really my top tips.
That was brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. And again, very practical in my mind. Assuming a candidate walks in, Alina, and because they were nervous or just very worried, and all they did throughout was just wear a very straight face and just like a plain expression throughout the interview. Is there a potential that might impact or influence hiring manager's decision?
Well, it's all a balance. I wouldn't just say that is the only, I would say it's the package. I also know that as a hiring manager that I've hired a lot of roles, most of of people come in very, very nervous. Some people would be very, very stern in their expression. And so I would try and stir up a conversation to relax that person, because you can't be yourself without that. And so, yeah, I do find that if you can find a way for you to relax before an interview, try and find ways to do that. I won't mark anyone down for that alone. It will have to be a combination of not having the right experience, not having the right skills, not having the right behavioral and culture fit for that to happen. But that's one piece of the puzzle that you need to be mindful of.
Thank you for sharing that. There's a moment in every interview where the candidates would have a bit of an opportunity to take the microphone and ask their own questions, right? What would be your perception? What would be your perception of a candidate who says, I don't have any question prepared for you, after you've asked them if they've had a question?
Please don't say you don't have any questions. We want to know what you're interested in. And it's really every opportunity that's been given to you. Every time we ask a question is a way for you to latch on to something that you can, again, speed dating analogy, you can sell yourself, you can tell us who you are. So don't miss the opportunity to be able to demonstrate that and talk about it. So when we ask you at the end of the day, do you have any questions for us? We actually want to know how keen you are on the role. So you can absolutely ask questions, anything that you want about the role. You can ask, I've had people ask me, hey, can you give me feedback about my interview there and there? Actually, that's not a bad thing either, because that feels that you're keen to learn and you're keen to know what you've made mistakes on. Again, it's a way to show your mindset around being able to take feedback and being willing to hear not so positive thoughts, putting yourself out there for those type of comments. But that's okay, because that actually says that you're very keen for the role, because you want to do so well. You want to learn about haven't I done? But what's really important is that once I've told you what isn't, like say, for example, if the comment was that I didn't hear enough about your banking experience, well, guess what? That's the breadcrumb for you to now take that and go, oh, yes, sorry, I wasn't very clear about my banking experience, but this is what I have done. So you can still pick it up. So it's a fallback plan by asking, hey, could you give me feedback about the interview? How did I perform? As soon as you hear those comments, it's a way for you to pick those things back up and say, hey, I've done this, I've done that. So rather than leaving it at the table and walking away from the interview not knowing what you could have done differently, why don't you solve it there and there? Just ask. What is the worst that can happen? Nothing worse than not knowing. And I think just ask. It's okay to ask. The other thing is people often also ask about what does success look like for the role. So rather than asking what were the flaws of the interview, you can also ask, hey, what does success look like for the role? If I'm successful, there's again another way for you to pick up whatever attributes that you felt like you haven't really demonstrated in the interview. As soon as that answer come out, you can go, well, those are things that I've done, or this is how I've done those things that you've just talked about. Again, another area to fill in the gaps in the interview when you didn't know whether you've missed anything. So I think that question right at the end, do you have any questions for us? Don't use it for what are the next steps for the interview. Use it for how did I go in the interview? Or, hey, what does success look like for me if I was to be successful? And then pick up those gaps along the way.
So the big thing that I'm hearing there, Elena, is because I wasn't too sure if candidates should really be asking for feedback in the interview for one reason, which is if you ask for the feedback, you better be ready to defend it and give them context, which is what you've just mentioned. So essentially, if you're not too sure, or if you know you wouldn't be prepared to give them a little bit buttressing your point, then that's probably not a great question for you. Because from your perspective, if someone says, was there anything during this interview that you would love for me to give you a bit more detailing or buttress? If they didn't give you some more context, that wouldn't have changed your impression about them.
Tayo, I think that's a defensive thought, but I would like everyone to think about it differently. This is your last chance to make that impression, and you'll never see these people again if you're not successful. So you have nothing to lose. So defend it or not, it's your best shot at getting that job. It's in your best interest to try anyway. If it fails, then you won't see them anymore, and that's okay. So I would say don't let that fear take over. Ask, and even if you don't succeed this time around, you've done enough practice, and next time you get asked that question again, you'll be in a better position to defend yourself, and then the next time, and you'll only get better at it. So use every interview as training ground to get yourself better at the next one. So 1 doesn't defy you, 10 doesn't defy you. and you can only do better. So I don't want that fear to stop you from asking. It's healthy and it's a way for you to train you up for these type of girly questions.
No, thank you. I really do appreciate that, because for me, that was also something I always thought about. And based off what you're saying, I think it's a really important question to ask as well. Just asking your hiring team, like, was there anything in this interview that I've said that you'd love for me to clarify? And you just roll with it. And
like I said, one interview doesn't define you and you don't see those people again. Well, that's it. You look for the next job, but then at least you pick the knowledge from this one. So you're not going to lose anything by asking that question, in my opinion. There's also another one that I just thought of is when you first start the interview and people ask you, tell me about yourself, just go ahead and be very clear around who you are and really get to the point of what is it that you're really, really good at. So those are really the first question and the last question, super important in just setting the scene and establishing who you are.
Brilliant. Thanks for sharing that. I wanted to delve a little bit more into the corporate sides of things.
Yeah.
And pretty much from an immigrant lens perspective. So from your experience, what part of corporate culture in Australia would you say can come off as confusing a fair bit to immigrants, as an example?
There is an appetite for people to be direct and speak up. I think those are two areas that I've talked about. Certainly, I think for me, being a Chinese background, I'm not encouraged in a normal circumstance to speak up easily and be quite honest about how you feel of certain things, as well as being direct in the way you communicate and talk about concerns and etc. Certainly wasn't easy from a cultural background coming into Australia now, thinking about being able to do that in a professional standpoint. It took me a long time to be able to be confident enough to do that. And I still find, depending on the setting, I sometimes have those thoughts in my head and go, oh, should I, not should I? Yeah. So that's really a culture shift in my mind. That's really, really different in Australia to other cultures.
Elena, you've got really extensive experience across Telstra, ANZ, Maya, People First Bank. If you had to pick one thing that accelerated your growth across these well-known companies, what would that be?
One thing as in one skill or one job?
I guess skill, influence, just one thing generally that you would say that it has really accelerated your growth. Like it could be your skill set, could be your technical skills, could be your soft skills, but like what would that one thing be that you would say, yeah, I'm going to attribute my growth across Telstra, ANZ, Maya, People First Bank to?
Yeah, so I've mentioned this briefly that I did say I had a really good mentor when I was in Maya. Yeah, the mentor was great in terms of supporting me, but more importantly, I think the biggest shift for me was being given the opportunity to do things. Having the opportunity to lead a piece of work, be able to have my own creative ideas and leading and completing a piece of work by myself. Just having the free reins to be able to do that was liberating. And I find myself really shifting from my role as BA, work in corporate environment. In my mind, I feel like a quite prescribed role to something that you have to set the direction and you have to create the path and you need to determine and you have to make those decisions. I found that liberating and I found my passion in being able to think about those things strategically, planning, direction setting, having a vision. That was really shifting my career from a contributor to a leader, and that was my turning point.
Shifting away slightly from interviewing right now, I just want to delve into like now you're in corporate Australia.
Yeah.
A lot of immigrants, which we did speak about earlier, I think very, very likely about imposter syndrome. And I do know that it's a big thing. And I guess it's part of us. And that one big friend that never goes away comes in when the light. So you're already working, you are on the job right now. Do you have any practical things that as an immigrant you could do to help you just live with imposter syndrome? Because I think trying to shake it away, I don't think that's possible. But like, I want to hear your thoughts.
The most important thing is not to undervalue your experience. Just because you've done it overseas does not mean that it's less valuable. I think skills and experience are fully transferable. You just need to be able to put it in the context of an Australian work environment. So in many ways, I have interviewed a lot of candidates who have had experience in other banks in New Zealand, Asia, different settings, and they don't perceive that as important. I actually think it's the way you deliver it, is the way you talk about it. Every experience counts, in my opinion. Don't undervalue that. Don't feel that that is less important or less valuable. Everything you do is important. The important thing, I think, is how do you make it more relatable for the person listening to it to understand why is it that is important. It's about shifting that context. So whilst you've done certain things in an overseas bank, you can say, hey, this is what I've done and this is how I would apply it in this particular role. That will make it more relevant, and that you're talking about, hey, I can still pick up the same skills and apply it within the setting of your environment. I think that's really important for people not to feel that imposter syndrome is all about feeling like what you've done is just not good enough. I actually think they're all really, really good skills and experience, but put it in the context and help feed the interviewer what that means and what is relatable to them. It's probably the art of how you deliver.
Some of the things that people say to me is they do a really excellent job on their respective jobs and they do really well, but just something that they struggle with mentally is being able to talk about their own wins and achievements. And from my lens, this can be like attributed to culturally, part of being humble is you not talking about how good you are or the things that you're really great at, because then people might consider it as you bragging, right? How do you think as an immigrant you can talk about our work without feeling like you're bragging? Like, what are some of the practical things that we can do?
To be fair, I struggle with this one myself. I find it really hard to talk about my achievements. So one of the most daunting tasks for me is to do that on an annual basis in a performance review context where you have to talk about your achievements. Yeah, look, it's not easy. I think culturally for me again as well, that I struggle talking about successes. Maybe another way you can think about it is rather than talking about as in, oh, this is what I've done and this is how good I am, translate it to this is the value for the organization I've provided. So shift it to the context of, oh, I've built and documented 10 processes within, 2 days and I've done, this and that. Rather than that, you can say, hey, I have streamlined the workflow for the business and I've cut, 5% of the turnaround time. So you're not bragging about you, you're talking about the achievement for the organization. It actually makes it even a stronger perception of you because you've actually taken it from this is what I've done to, hey, this is how I've given value to the organization versus my own way of showing success without the feeling that I'm bragging. I think mentally that's how I've done it.
I appreciate the vulnerability and thanks for sharing that. I was going to ask you, so you're new in the country right now, you've just come into the country as an immigrant. If you were to tell them one habit that they should pick up very early to set them up for success, what would that be?
One habit? Well, in order to understand etiquette, culture, Australian culture, communication, it's important to immerse yourself into that and understand it, because that actually would help you do better in interviews, networking, meeting people, finding your own network, which is all super important when you're in a new country. This may seem a bit trivial, but I actually find that really helpful. It's just to watch a lot of Australian TV and shows, because you end up picking up the culture and learning the way people use language, the jargon, the slangs, etiquette, how people interact with one another. I find you learn a lot more about the culture through television, through programs, and being able to have that will help you transition to a different environment, into a different country.
I was going to say, Alina, if you met a stranger on the road right now and they said to you, I've got a business analyst interview upcoming and it's actually my first interview ever in Australia. What are the things that you'd say to them? Maybe help them feel confident about the interview?
Well, I would say first thing is don't just go to that interview and have it for the first time in your life. Go and practice it and go and actually have those conversations and practice with people around you first. You've got to get the nerves away. You've got to get yourself prepared. So start looking at what is a role about and start writing out points for yourself. Start practicing and having those conversations with people around you that can give you honest opinion about how you can do better or how you can answer things differently. Or you can even correct yourself as you talk and as you do those mock interviews with people around you. You find yourself going, oh, actually I've waffled on a bit too much, or actually I could have said this differently, and okay, maybe I'll write that down. So when you have those interviews, try and have as much practice as you can before you do it. That in itself will help build confidence, because I find even, I go to interviews myself as an interviewee. I found that I get super nervous as well going into interviews. As soon as I start thinking about it and I start writing down the things I'm going to talk about, the preparedness psychologically gives you an advantage. privilege because you feel like, oh, you've got things that you can talk about now. You've got ammo that you can come in and actually you can talk through. I don't need to wing it. I don't need to think about it off the cuff. I can just come in and know what I need to say. Oh yeah, I'll still be nervous. Absolutely. But at least the practice and the prep work will help take some of that edge away.
That is super relatable, very relatable. Thank you, Elena. Was there anything that you wanted to share on today's podcast that I haven't covered?
Oh, I think you've covered quite a lot. I am just so privileged to be part of this conversation. I think to me, it is so hard for anyone to come to a brand new country and feel like they belong. I do want to say we are all unique and special, and that all of the skills and experience that you have are super important, and don't ever feel that it isn't, and don't let the self-doubt take over, and always feel that the more you practice, the better you get at it. And at any interview or job setting, it's not the be all and end all. It's one, and then you get better at the next one, and then you get better at the next one, and just pick up how you would want to learn along the way. Like questions like, how did you find me in the interview? What can I do better? Those are really good ways. And even if you don't feel comfortable, after the interview, you can even ask the HR person, hey, was there any interviewing notes that you can share with me, or any tips that you can share with me about their observations that I can learn from? You can do that after the meeting as well. Felt more comfortable doing it afterwards. Pick up those things so you can then perfect the next one. But just don't feel that this is the only shot. Just feel that you can evolve as you go, and feel as confident as you can, and show yourself, and smile and be passionate. Those are the things that really stand you apart. But I am a true believer that I know lots of really qualified and highly experienced people from other countries that can find their path. And so I truly believe that is also a possibility for everyone that is listening to this podcast. Really grateful that we've having this interview and conversation.
It is indeed really true that being an immigrant is not a limitation, but one thing you do need a strategy and a lot of self-belief, which is what you really highlighted a lot today, Elena. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you very much.